Well, more than a week ago, Syria's regime collapsed. Syria's ousted President Bashar Al-Assad fled the country and was granted asylum in Moscow. But Russia's President Vladimir Putin has stayed silent on the topic of Syria, even during an annual meeting between himself and Russia's defence minister earlier this week. It highlights the potential uncertainty in terms of the future of Russia's military bases in Syria. Joining us with more analysis is Senior Fellow at the Centre for Defence Studies, the ANU, Professor Matthew Sussex. Matt, good to see you. Thanks so much for your time. Meantime, we've seen the first statement from Bashar al-Assad suggesting that he didn't want to leave Syria but was forced to do so by his Russian allies. What do we know about how much string pulling Vladimir Putin was doing behind the scenes?
Well, look, Ash, I think this is fairly typical thing for a fallen dictator to say, that they were actually at a military base, valiantly coordinating the defence and had no desire whatsoever to leave. But because there were far too many drones and artillery, the Russians took the decision to evacuate Assad to Moscow. I'm not sure how much store to put by that. But nonetheless, certainly the case that the Russians have welcomed him into the country, and that, of course, is his stay in Russia is perhaps even contingent on the type of relationship that Russia sets up with the new government in Syria, because you can be fairly certain they're going to want him back, because they're going to want to put him on trial for crimes against the Syrian people.
Yeah, you would think that there's a way to run on that. What happens in the meantime to Russia's military bases in Syria? That's probably the main game for Russia.
Well, look, Russia had an enormous presence, in Syria, certainly in territory held by Assad, up until the collapse. And the thing that we've seen is that those Russian forces have been drawing back and contracting, so that they're now all penned up inside just two bases, the Tartus naval base and an air base just nearby. And it remains to be seen whether the new government in Damascus is going to allow the Russians to keep those bases open. My suspicion would be that the Russians would be okay with losing the air base, but they will very badly want to hang on to that naval facility, because that's how they resupply all their forces and people who are currently in Africa doing a lot of work with African governments, a lot of which often leads to things like human rights abuses, I'm afraid.
And what has Russia signalled in terms of Ukraine that they're planning to do as we head into 2025?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Ukraine situation for Moscow is, I suppose, sort of more of the same. The most recent reports have it that we've started to see the first North Korean soldiers dying in significant numbers as a result of being used in human wave attacks at the front. My suspicion will be that the Russians will want to grab as much land as possible before they even countenance talking peace with the new Trump administration. And when he takes office, I think then Moscow will say, okay, well, what is Trump going to bring to the table to give us what we want? And Putin would probably feel that he's in a relatively strong position, given his relationship with Trump, and the fact that Trump has put a bit of political capital into saying that he can end this conflict pretty swiftly.
Yep, it's going to be fascinating to see how all of that plays out next year. Matthew Sussex, always appreciate your analysis. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ash.